Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey back in time to an era of dust, blood, and thunderous applause. Imagine, if you will, the scorching Roman sun beating down on your brow, the metallic tang of fear and anticipation in the air, and the distant roar of a crowd that hungers for spectacle. You're standing in a dimly lit antechamber, the rough-hewn stone cool against your calloused hands, the scent of stale sweat and something vaguely animalistic clinging to the air. The clang of distant steel echoes, a rhythmic, unsettling beat that vibrates through the soles of your worn sandals. You could almost feel the weight of the heavy bronze helmet, the rough texture of the leather straps against your chin, and the chilling realization that your next breath might be your last. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll go out with a bang, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling brave, drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story, you see, doesn't begin with the grand Colosseum, nor with the iconic image of a thumbs down from an emperor. No, to truly understand the Gladiator, you have to travel much further back, to the shadowy, mist-shrouded lands of ancient Etruria. Picture this, a funeral. Not your typical somber affair with hushed whispers and solemn hymns, but something far more visceral. Here, in the 4th century BCE, the Etrurians, a mysterious and sophisticated civilization that predated the Romans in central Italy, had a rather unique way of honoring their deceased aristocrats. They believed that the shedding of blood would appease the spirits of the dead, a sort of spiritual fertilizer for the afterlife. So instead of eulogies and quiet reflection, they held contests. Not just any contests, mind you, but duels to the death between armed men. These weren't professional fighters, not yet. They were often slaves or prisoners of war, forced to fight as a sacrifice, a final, brutal offering to the departed. You can almost hear the gasps of the onlookers, the dull thud of bodies hitting the earth, the desperate cries of the combatants. It's a far cry from the polished spectacle we associate with gladiators, isn't it? More like a grim, impromptu backyard brawl with very high stakes. Historians still argue whether these early Etrurian rituals were purely religious or if there was an element of entertainment woven into their grim fabric from the very beginning. Was it a sacred duty, or did someone just think, hey, this is kind of fun to watch? It's a question that echoes through the ages, much like the faint clang of steel on shield.
Now, as the Roman Republic began to flex its muscles and expand its influence, they encountered these Etruscan customs. The Romans, ever practical and always keen to absorb useful traditions, saw the potential in these funeral games. The first recorded gladiatorial contest in Rome itself took place in 264 BCE, during the early Punic Wars. It was held in the Forum Boarium, the cattle market, which, let's be honest, sounds like a rather unglamorous venue for such a momentous occasion. 3 pairs of gladiators, likely captives from the recently conquered Samnites, fought to honor the deceased Decimus Junius Brutus Pera. Imagine the scene, the smell of livestock, the shouts of vendors, and then, suddenly, the clash of swords and the roar of a crowd witnessing something entirely new to their city. It was a novelty, a curiosity, a grim fascination. These early Roman games, known as munera, were still deeply rooted in their funerary origins. They were private affairs, sponsored by wealthy individuals to commemorate their ancestors. It was a way to display wealth, power, and piety all at once. Think of it as the ultimate status symbol. Instead of a fancy car, you'd throw a deadly fight club in your dead dad's honor. Pretty metal, right? But here's the quirky bit. Some historians suggest that these early gladiatorial contests might have also served a more practical purpose beyond appeasing spirits. In a society that valued martial prowess above almost all else, these fights could have been a way to train soldiers, to desensitize the populace to violence, and to instill a certain ruthlessness necessary for imperial expansion. It's a bit like a very extreme, very bloody public service announcement for military recruitment. You watch these guys fight and you think, wow, I really need to get good with a sword if I don't want to end up like that. Or perhaps, I really need to avoid getting captured by the Romans. Either way, it was a powerful message. The transition from purely religious ritual to public spectacle was slow, almost imperceptible at first. It wasn't a sudden decree, but a gradual evolution driven by a combination of religious belief, social display, and a growing public appetite for thrilling, dangerous entertainment. The Romans, with their genius for organization and their insatiable desire for grandiosity, were about to take this grim Etruscan tradition and turn it into something truly colossal. And you, my friend, are about to witness its rise.
Remember that cattle market, the Forum Boarium, where the first Roman gladiator fights took place? Well, you're still there, but the air is starting to change. The dust still rises, but now it's mixed with the scent of anticipation, not just livestock. The Romans, ever the innovators, quickly realized that these munera had a power far beyond simply honoring the dead. They were a potent tool for public relations, a way for ambitious politicians and wealthy families to curry favor with the masses. Think of it as ancient Roman campaign rallies, but instead of bland speeches and lukewarm promises, you got blood, sweat, and tears. Literally. The games began to move from private funerals to public festivals, often associated with the funerals of prominent citizens, but increasingly they became standalone events. You see, the Roman Republic was a fiercely competitive place, and gaining the support of the plebs, the common people, was crucial for anyone aspiring to political office. What better way to win hearts and minds than by providing thrilling, free entertainment? It was a genius move, really. Bread and circuses, as the saying would later go, were the ultimate crowd pleasers. One mainstream historical fact you need to grasp is that the shift from private funerary rites to public spectacles was largely driven by the aediles. These were Roman magistrates responsible for public works, markets, and, crucially, public games. If you wanted to make a name for yourself, if you wanted to climb the cursus honorum, the ladder of political offices, sponsoring a lavish gladiator show was a surefire way to do it. Imagine yourself as an aspiring aedile, pouring your family's fortune into training gladiators, building temporary arenas, and advertising the event. You'd be walking through the forum, hearing whispers of your generosity, seeing the excitement in the eyes of the citizens. It was an investment, a calculated gamble for political power. And the stakes were high, not just for the gladiators, but for your career. If your games were a flop, if the crowd wasn't entertained, your political ambitions might just die a quicker death than any gladiator. Now, for a quirky tidbit, these early public games weren't always held in purpose-built amphitheaters. Oh no! Sometimes they'd simply clear out a space in the forum, set up temporary wooden stands, and let the show begin. Imagine trying to watch a deadly duel while dodging vendors selling olives and listening to someone haggle over a goat. It must have been quite the chaotic scene, a true testament to the Roman ability to make entertainment out of anything, anywhere. It's like trying to hold a UFC fight in the middle of Times Square during rush hour. You'd get a crowd all right, but the logistics would be a nightmare. Yet they did it, and the crowds flocked. The sheer accessibility of these early games, even in makeshift venues, contributed significantly to their burgeoning popularity. You didn't need a special ticket or a fancy seat, you just needed to show up.
As the games grew in popularity, so did the demand for gladiators. This led to the establishment of specialized training schools, known as ludi.
We'll delve deeper into those later, but for now, understand that the professionalization of gladiator combat was a direct consequence of its increasing role in Roman public life. No longer were they just captured enemies fighting for their lives. They were becoming trained performers, albeit performers whose lives were constantly on the line. This transition wasn't without its critics, of course. Some Roman intellectuals, like Cicero, expressed discomfort with the brutality of the games, arguing that they desensitized the populace and promoted a thirst for violence. But their voices were largely drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Historians still argue whether the Roman elite genuinely believed in the moral benefits of the games, promoting courage, discipline, and contempt for death, or if these were merely convenient justifications for a popular form of mass entertainment that served their political ends. Was it civic virtue, or just a really good distraction? The evolution of the games also saw a diversification of gladiator types. Initially, the fighters often reflected the enemies Rome had conquered: Samnites, Gauls, Thracians. This served a dual purpose. It showcased Roman military might and allowed the audience to symbolically reenact victories over their foes. You'd see a Samnite gladiator armed with a large shield and short sword fighting a Thracian with his curved sica and small round shield. It was a living history lesson, a propaganda show, and a blood sport all rolled into one. The audience, you, would be cheering for the Roman-style fighter, of course, reinforcing your own identity and loyalty to the Republic. It was a powerful psychological tool, binding the citizens together through shared spectacle and shared triumph, even if the triumph was just watching two poor souls hack at each other. The increasing scale and frequency of these games also necessitated more sophisticated organization. Temporary wooden structures gave way to more permanent, albeit still wooden, amphitheatrics. The logistics of feeding, housing, and training hundreds of gladiators, not to mention managing the massive crowds, became a significant undertaking. It was, in essence, the birth of the entertainment industry, Roman style. And like any good industry, it needed a constant supply of talent. This is where the grim reality of slavery and conquest played a crucial role. The vast majority of gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. They had no choice in their fate. You, as a Roman citizen, might feel a pang of pity, perhaps, but mostly you'd feel the thrill of the spectacle, the power of your collective will, and the satisfaction of seeing Rome's might displayed in such a visceral way. It's easy to judge from our comfortable armchairs, isn't it? But imagine the social pressures, the ingrained beliefs, the sheer excitement of it all. The games were a reflection of Roman society, its values, its hierarchies, and its insatiable appetite for power and spectacle. And they were only just beginning to truly take shape.
So you've seen the early, chaotic spectacles, the makeshift arenas, and the burgeoning appetite for blood sport. Now let's pull back the curtain on where these fighters were forged, where men were transformed from captives and criminals into the lethal entertainers of Rome. We're talking about the ludus, the gladiator training school. Imagine stepping through a heavy, iron-bound gate, the clang echoing behind you, sealing you off from the outside world. The air inside is thick with the smell of sweat, leather, and something vaguely medicinal, perhaps liniment or the scent of healing wounds. You hear the rhythmic thud of wooden swords against shields, the sharp crack of a whip, and the grunts of men pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. This isn't a spa retreat, my friend. This is where you learn to kill, or be killed. A mainstream historical fact about the ludus is that it was a highly organized and brutal institution. Each school was run by a lanista, a manager and owner of gladiators, who was often a former gladiator himself. These lanistae were shrewd businessmen, investing heavily in their human property, and they expected a return on that investment. They were, in a sense, the ancient world's equivalent of sports team owners, but with a much more direct and often deadly relationship with their athletes. The discipline within a ludus was iron-fisted. You, as a new recruit, would quickly learn that disobedience meant severe punishment, often involving the whip or even death. Your life, such as it was
was no longer your own. You were bound by an oath, the Sacramentum Gladiatorium, a chilling vow to endure being burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. Sounds like a fun club, right? Your days would be a relentless cycle of physical training. You'd start with basic conditioning, running, jumping, and lifting weights, often heavy wooden logs. Then came the weapon training. You wouldn't start with a sharp blade, oh no. You'd begin with a rudis, a wooden sword, often heavier than its steel counterpart, designed to build strength and stamina. You'd practice against a polis, a wooden post, honing your strikes, parries, and footwork. Imagine swinging that heavy wooden sword hour after hour, your muscles screaming, sweat stinging your eyes, as the doctores, the trainers, often veteran gladiators themselves, barked orders and corrected your every move. They'd teach you the specific fighting styles of different gladiator types, preparing you for the role you were destined to play in the arena. It was a grueling curriculum designed to break you down and then rebuild you into a fighting machine.
Now for a quirky tidbit. Despite the brutal training and the constant threat of death, gladiators were surprisingly well fed. Forget the image of starving, emaciated fighters. Archaeological evidence, particularly from gladiator cemeteries, suggests that their diet was rich in carbohydrates, primarily barley and beans, with some dried fruit and nuts. Meat was a rarity. This diet, often referred to as barley eaters, hordeari, provided the necessary energy for their intense training and helped them build a layer of subcutaneous fat. Why fat, you ask? Well, it wasn't for comfort. This layer of fat would protect vital organs from shallow cuts, allowing them to sustain more superficial wounds and prolong the fight, making for a more exciting spectacle for the crowd. It's a bit like wearing a natural squishy suit of armor. So while you might dream of a juicy steak after a hard day's training, you'd probably be getting a hearty bowl of barley gruel. Not exactly gourmet, but it kept you alive and fighting. The social hierarchy within the ludus was strict. At the top were the doctores, the trainers, who were often former gladiators who had earned their freedom or were highly respected for their skill. Below them were the experienced gladiators, the veterans who had survived multiple bouts and were considered valuable assets. At the bottom were the novicii, the new recruits, like you, who had to prove their worth. There was a sense of camaraderie, perhaps, among those who shared the same grim fate, but also intense rivalry. Your survival often depended on your ability to outperform your peers, to catch the eye of the lanista and secure a place in the next games. Historians still argue whether gladiators were truly slaves in the traditional sense once they entered the ludus, or if their unique status afforded them a different kind of existence. While they were certainly owned and controlled, their value as entertainers meant they were often treated better than typical slaves, receiving specialized medical care, good food, and even a degree of fame. Some even argue that for certain individuals, particularly those from impoverished backgrounds, becoming a gladiator offered a slim chance at a better life, or at least a more exciting one than their previous existence. Was it a gilded cage or a desperate opportunity? It's a complex question, one that highlights the nuanced and often contradictory nature of Roman society. Medical care in the ludus was surprisingly advanced for the time. The medicus, the doctor, was a crucial member of the staff, responsible for patching up wounds, setting bones, and ensuring the gladiators were fit to fight. Galen, the famous Roman physician, actually began his career as a doctor to gladiators in Pergamon, gaining invaluable experience in anatomy and trauma. Imagine the kind of injuries they dealt with on a daily basis: deep cuts, broken limbs, concussions. It was a brutal, hands-on education in human physiology. They had access to various herbs, poultices, and even rudimentary surgical tools. Their goal wasn't just to heal, but to get you back into the arena as quickly as possible.
Life in the ludus was a constant reminder of your precarious existence. You might form bonds with your fellow gladiators, sharing stories and fears in the dimly lit barracks. You might even dream of earning your freedom, the rudis, the wooden sword that symbolized retirement. But every day, you knew that your ultimate purpose was to entertain, to bleed, and perhaps to die for the amusement of the Roman crowd. The ludus was a factory of death, but also, paradoxically, a place where incredible physical prowess and discipline were cultivated. It was a microcosm of Roman society's fascination with power, control, and the spectacle of life and death. And you, the gladiator, were at its very heart. Having survived the grueling regimen of the ludus, you're now intimately familiar with the weight of a wooden sword and the sting of a training whip. But the real arena, my friend, demands real steel and a very specific kind of protection. Tonight, we're going to arm you, or at least show you the fascinating arsenal that defined the different gladiator types. This wasn't a free-for-all where everyone grabbed whatever looked sharp. Oh no, the equipment was meticulously designed, not just for combat, but for spectacle, and it dictated the very style of the fight. It's like a highly specialized rock-paper-scissors game, but with much sharper edges and significantly higher stakes. A mainstream historical fact is that gladiator equipment was often standardized and designed to create specific matchups. Each gladiator type had a distinct panoply of weapons and armor, which made for predictable yet exciting duels. Take the Murmillo, for instance. You'd recognize him by his large rectangular shield, the scutum, which was a Roman legionary's shield, and his short, straight sword, the gladius. His helmet, often adorned with a fish crest, hence the name from mormillos, a type of fish, was heavy and enclosed, offering excellent protection but limiting his vision and hearing. He was a heavily armed, offensive fighter, designed to mimic the Roman legionary, a symbol of Roman might. When you saw a Murmillo, you knew you were watching a powerful, direct combatant, a sort of ancient Roman tank, if you will. Then you had his frequent opponent, the Thraex or Thracian. He was lighter, more agile, and armed with a small square or rectangular shield, the parmula, and a curved short sword called a sica. His helmet was often topped with a griffin, a mythical beast, and he wore greaves on both legs, protecting him from knee to shin. The sica was designed for hooking and slashing, perfect for getting around an opponent's shield. Imagine the contrast, the Murmillo, a wall of steel and muscle, facing off against the nimble Thraex, darting in and out, trying to find an opening. It was a classic heavy versus light matchup, a bit like watching a sumo wrestler try to catch a ninja. Now, for a quirky tidbit. One of the most unique and visually striking gladiators was the retiarius. This guy was the ultimate minimalist. He fought with almost no armor, save for a shoulder guard, the galeris, on his left arm and shoulder, and sometimes a padded arm guard. His weapons? A large net, a rete, a trident, a fucina, and a dagger, a pugio. His strategy was all about speed and evasion. He tried to ensnare his opponent with the net, then stab them with the trident or finish them off with the dagger. His usual opponent was the secutor, a gladiator specifically designed to counter the retiarius. His helmet was smooth and round, with only 2 small eye holes to prevent the net from snagging on it. He carried a scutum and a gladius, much like the Murmillo, but his entire kit was optimized for chasing down and cornering the elusive netman. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, a bit like trying to catch a fish with a really big fork while wearing a bucket on your head.
Other gladiator types had their own distinct gear. The hoplomachus, for example, was heavily armored, mimicking a Greek hoplite, with a small, round shield, a spear, and a short sword. The provocator was the only gladiator type whose equipment was standardized regardless of his opponent. He wore a breastplate, a helmet with a visor, and carried a scutum and gladius. The Esidarius fought from a chariot, a truly spectacular sight, while the Dimachorus fought with 2 swords, one in each hand, requiring incredible skill and coordination. Each piece of equipment, from the ornate helmets to the protective greaves, was not just functional, but also served to identify the gladiator, making it easier for the crowd to follow the action and pick their favorites. The materials used for this gear were often of high quality. Helmets were typically made of bronze, sometimes intricately decorated. Shields were wood, covered in leather and reinforced with metal. Weapons were, of course, steel. The weight of this equipment was considerable. Imagine fighting for your life under the scorching sun, wearing a heavy bronze helmet that restricts your breathing, carrying a massive wooden shield, and swinging a sword. It was an athletic feat of the highest order, demanding immense strength, endurance, and skill. You, as a gladiator, would spend countless hours in the ludus, not just learning to fight, but learning to fight with your specific gear, to make it an extension of your body. Historians still argue whether the specific pairings of gladiator types were primarily for tactical balance, ensuring a fair and exciting fight, or if they were more about symbolic representation, pitting different conquered peoples or fighting styles against each other. Was it a carefully choreographed dance of death, or a symbolic reenactment of Roman dominance? It's likely a bit of both, a clever blend of martial strategy and theatrical flair. The Romans understood that a good show needed both suspense and a clear narrative, and the distinct gladiator types, with their contrasting equipment and fighting styles, provided just that. Even the less common gladiator types had their unique quirks. The Andabate, for instance, fought blindfolded, adding an element of chaotic unpredictability to the arena. The Loquiarius used a lasso, trying to rope his opponent. These variations kept the games fresh and exciting for the insatiable Roman public. The variety of equipment meant a variety of training. A retiarius wouldn't train like a mormolo. Their entire approach to combat was fundamentally different. This specialization meant that the doctores in the ludus had to be masters of many different fighting forms, capable of instructing their charges in the nuances of each weapon and armor set. So as you stand there, perhaps imagining the feel of a gladius in your hand or the weight of a scutum on your arm, remember that every piece of equipment told a story. It spoke of a specific fighting style, a traditional opponent, and a role in the grand, bloody drama of the arena. It was the uniform of death, but also, paradoxically, the uniform of fame, however fleeting. And for you, the gladiator, it was the only thing standing between you and oblivion.
We've touched upon a few of them already, those distinct figures you'd see marching into the arena, each with their own unique silhouette and fighting style. But now, let's truly get to know the main players, the stars of the show, the gladiators who filled the Roman arenas with their courage and their blood. This wasn't just a random collection of fighters. It was a carefully curated roster, designed to offer variety, suspense, and a constant stream of fresh matchups. Think of it as an ancient Roman fighting game, where each character had their own stats, special moves, and preferred opponents. And you, the audience, knew them all by heart. A mainstream historical fact is that the most common gladiator types evolved over time, often reflecting Roman military history and their encounters with various foreign peoples. We've already met the Murmillo, the heavily armed fighter with his large scutum and gladius, often paired against the Thrax, the agile fighter with his sica and small shield. These two were perennial crowd pleasers, their contrasting styles making for dynamic and often prolonged duels. The secutor, literally meaning pursuer, was another heavily armed type, specifically designed to fight the retiarius. His smooth, egg-shaped helmet with tiny eye holes was a direct counter to the net, preventing it from snagging. He was built for speed and endurance, relentlessly pursuing his lightly armored opponent. Then there was the hoplomachus, whose name means armored fighter. He was equipped like a Greek hoplite, with a small round shield, a spear, and a short sword. He wore greaves on both legs and a helmet with a large brim and crest. His fighting style was defensive, relying on his spear to keep opponents at bay before closing in with his sword. He often fought against the murmillo or the thrax, offering another interesting clash of styles. Imagine the murmillo's brute force against the hoplomachus's disciplined defense. It was a tactical chess match played out with lethal weapons. Now for a quirky tidbit, one of the more unusual gladiator types was the eques, or horseman. These gladiators began their fights on horseback, armed with a spear and a gladius and a small, round shield. After an initial cavalry skirmish, they would dismount and continue the fight on foot. This added an extra layer of spectacle and complexity to the games, as it required not only fighting skill, but also horsemanship. It's like starting a boxing match with a joust, then dismounting for the main event. You can imagine the excitement in the crowd as these mounted warriors charged, spears lowered, before dismounting with practiced ease to continue the duel on solid ground. It was a rare sight, but a memorable one. Another interesting type was the provocator, or challenger. This gladiator was unique because his equipment was standardized, regardless of his opponent. He wore a breastplate, a helmet with a visor, and carried a scutum and gladius. He typically fought against another provocator, making for a symmetrical and often brutal contest. It was a test of pure skill and endurance between two identically equipped fighters, a bit like a mirror match in a video game, but with real consequences. The Dimachurus, as we briefly mentioned, was a gladiator who fought with two swords, one in each hand. This required incredible dexterity and coordination, making him a formidable and often terrifying opponent. Imagine trying to defend against two blades coming at you from different angles simultaneously. It was a high-risk, high-reward style, often leading to quick and decisive victories or defeats.
Historians still argue whether the specific rules and pairings of gladiator types were primarily designed to ensure fair fights and prolong the spectacle, or if they were more about creating a symbolic narrative for the audience. Was it a genuine attempt at sporting fairness, or was it simply good showmanship designed to maximize the drama and excitement? It's a debate that highlights the tension between the brutal reality of the games and their theatrical presentation. Beyond these main types, there were also more exotic or specialized gladiators. The Siderius, for example, fought from a chariot, a truly grand spectacle that evoked images of ancient Celtic warfare. The Liquarius used a lasso to ensnare his opponents, adding an element of trickery to the combat. The Sagittarius was an archer, though less common in the arena, as ranged combat could be less engaging for the close-up crowd. These less common types often appeared in special events or as part of larger, more elaborate shows designed to keep the audience on the edge of their seats. The classification of gladiators wasn't just about their weapons, it was about their entire persona. Their training, their fighting style, even their perceived origin, Thracian, Samnite, Gaul, contributed to their identity in the arena. You, as a Roman spectator, would quickly learn to identify these types, to anticipate their moves, and to cheer or jeer based on your preferences. It was a complex system designed to create a rich tapestry of combat, where every fight was a unique story unfolding before your eyes. And for the gladiators themselves, their type defined their life, their training, and ultimately, their fate. You've seen the training, You've learned about the weapons and you've met the various types of fighters. But what was life like for a gladiator when he wasn't in the arena, or even in the grueling training yard of the ludus? It's easy to imagine a life solely defined by combat and confinement, but the reality, as always, is a little more nuanced, and perhaps, surprisingly, a little more human. You might think it was all chains and gruel, but for some there were moments, however fleeting, of something resembling a normal existence, or at least a life less brutal than that of a typical slave. A mainstream historical fact is that despite their status as slaves or condemned criminals, gladiators often enjoyed a unique social standing, a paradoxical blend of infamy and celebrity. They were, in essence, the rock stars of the Roman world. Their images adorned lamps, mosaics, and even children's toys. Graffiti praising their prowess was scrawled on walls across the empire. When a gladiator won, especially a popular one, he was celebrated, showered with gifts, and sometimes even had fan clubs. Imagine the roar of the crowd, not just for the fight, but for you, the individual. You might have been a slave, but in that moment, you were more famous, more adored than many free citizens. This fame, however, was a double-edged sword. It meant you were valuable property, worth preserving for future spectacles, but it also meant your life was constantly on display, every victory and every defeat scrutinized by thousands. Their living conditions within the ludus were generally better than those of many other slaves. As we discussed, they were well fed and they received medical care. Their barracks, while Spartan, were often clean and provided a degree of communal living. You'd share a small cell with a few other gladiators, perhaps forming bonds of camaraderie, or perhaps fostering intense rivalries. There was a strict hierarchy, and older, more experienced gladiators often held a position of respect, even authority, among their peers. You might find yourself looking up to a grizzled veteran, hoping to learn his tricks, or perhaps just hoping to survive as long as he had.
Now, for a quirky tidbit, some gladiators, particularly those who achieved significant fame and success, were allowed to have wives and families, even while still enslaved. These families would often live outside the ludus, and the gladiator might be permitted visits, or even have his family live in quarters attached to the school. Imagine the emotional complexity of such a life, a brutal, dangerous profession, yet with the possibility of domesticity and love. It's a stark contrast to the image of the solitary, doomed fighter. These relationships, however, were always precarious, subject to the whims of the lanista and the ever-present threat of death in the arena. But it shows that even within the confines of their grim existence, gladiators sought, and sometimes found, moments of human connection and normalcy. It's a bit like a modern-day athlete, constantly on the road, but with the added pressure of knowing every game could be your last. Beyond the arena and the training ground, gladiators were sometimes employed for other tasks. They might serve as bodyguards for their lanista or for wealthy patrons. Their imposing physiques and combat skills made them ideal for such roles. You might find yourself standing guard at a lavish banquet, listening to the idle chatter of the Roman elite, a silent, watchful presence, a stark reminder of the power that lay beneath the surface of Roman society. They were also sometimes used in public processions or parades, showcasing their impressive physiques and weaponry, further cementing their celebrity status. Their diet, as mentioned, was primarily vegetarian, rich in carbohydrates. This wasn't just for energy, but it also helped them build a layer of fat that, surprisingly, offered some protection against superficial wounds. Think of it as a natural, albeit squishy, form of padding. They also consumed a drink made from plant ash, which was rich in calcium and helped strengthen their bones, crucial for absorbing the impact of blows. It's like an ancient Roman sports drink, but probably tasted a lot less appealing than your modern electrolyte concoctions. Historians still argue whether the limited freedoms and privileges afforded to some gladiators were a genuine attempt at humane treatment or simply a pragmatic strategy by Lanistai to protect their valuable assets and ensure their cooperation.
Was it a form of benevolent paternalism or just good business sense? It's a debate that highlights the complex moral landscape of Roman slavery, where the value of a human life could be measured in terms of its entertainment potential.
Despite the harsh realities, there were avenues for gladiators to gain their freedom. A gladiator who survived many fights or who performed exceptionally well might be granted his freedom, symbolized by the presentation of a wooden sword, the rudis. This was the ultimate goal, the dream that kept many fighting. Imagine the moment, the roar of the crowd, not for a kill but for your liberation. You'd walk out of the arena a free man, perhaps to become a doctor in a ludus or to live out your days in quiet retirement, forever marked by the scars of your past. Some even chose to return to the arena as free men, drawn by the fame, the thrill, or perhaps the only life they truly knew. It's a testament to the strange allure of the arena, even for those who had escaped its clutches. However, it's crucial to remember that this was the exception, not the rule. The vast majority of gladiators died in the arena or succumbed to their wounds. Their lives were short, brutal, and often ended in anonymity. For every famous gladiator who earned his freedom, there were hundreds, if not thousands, who perished. The possibility of freedom, however slim, served as a powerful motivator, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak existence. So while you might picture gladiators as constantly fighting or training, their daily lives were a complex tapestry of discipline, limited freedoms, and the ever-present shadow of the arena. They were both victims and celebrities, slaves and heroes, living a life that was both brutal and, in its own way, deeply human. And for you, the gladiator, every sunrise was a reminder that you were still alive, still breathing, and still one step closer to either glory or oblivion. You've walked the training grounds, felt the weight of the weapons, and glimpsed the paradoxical life of a gladiator. Now, let's set the stage literally. We're moving from the dusty training yards and makeshift forums to the very heart of the spectacle, the arena itself. These were not just pits of sand, they were engineering marvels, symbols of Roman power and the ultimate theaters of life and death. You're about to step into the grandest of them all, but first, let's trace their evolution. Remember those early chaotic fights in the Forum Boarium? Well, as the games grew in popularity and scale, the Romans, with their unparalleled knack for engineering, realized they needed dedicated structures. Initially, these were temporary wooden amphitheaters, erected for specific games and then dismantled. Imagine the logistical feat, building a massive wooden structure complete with seating for thousands in a matter of weeks, only to tear it down again. It's like building a stadium for the Super Bowl and then immediately recycling it. These early structures were often built in open fields or repurposed public spaces, designed to maximize the view for the eager crowds. You'd jostle for a spot, craning your neck to catch a glimpse of the action, the roar of the crowd amplified by the enclosed space. A mainstream historical fact is that the Flavianum Amphitheater, better known as the Colosseum, is the most iconic and largest amphitheater ever built, commissioned by Emperor Vespasian in 72 CE and completed by his son Titus in 80 CE. It was a monumental undertaking, a testament to Roman engineering prowess and their insatiable appetite for spectacle. Imagine standing before it, a colossal oval of travertine stone rising 4 stories high, capable of holding an estimated 50,000 to 80,000 spectators. You'd feel dwarfed by its sheer scale, a tiny ant in a world built for giants. Its design was revolutionary, featuring a complex system of arches, vaults, and corridors that allowed for efficient crowd control, ensuring that tens of thousands of people could enter and exit in minutes. It was the ultimate fan experience, ancient Roman style, complete with numbered gates and designated seating sections, much like a modern stadium, except, with more lions.
Beneath the wooden floor of the arena lay the hypogeum, a labyrinthine underground network of tunnels, cages, and mechanical lifts. This was the true engine room of the spectacle, where gladiators, wild animals, and elaborate stage props were held, ready to be hoisted into the arena at a moment's notice. Imagine the sounds echoing through those dark tunnels, the growls of hungry beasts, the nervous murmurs of gladiators, the creak of ropes and pulleys. You'd be down there, waiting for your cue, the anticipation of physical weight in your gut, knowing that at any moment you could be thrust into the blinding sunlight and the roar of the crowd. It was a marvel of hidden engineering, designed to create seamless transitions and spectacular surprises for the audience above. It's like the backstage of a Broadway show, but instead of costume changes, you're dealing with tigers and trapdoors. Now for a quirky tidbit, the Colosseum and many other amphitheaters could be flooded for naval battles, known as naumachii. While the Colosseum's ability to host full-scale naval battles is debated by some historians due to the hypogeum's later construction, it's known that other, earlier amphitheaters certainly did. Imagine the arena floor, usually covered in sand, slowly filling with water, transforming into a vast lake where miniature warships would clash. You'd see mock battles, complete with tiny fleets and gladiators acting as sailors, recreating famous naval victories. It was an incredible feat of hydraulic engineering, demonstrating the Romans' mastery over water. It's a bit like turning a football stadium into a giant swimming pool for a synchronized swimming competition, but with actual combat. The sheer audacity of it, the desire to bring the sea to the city, speaks volumes about the Roman love for grand, immersive spectacles. The design of amphitheaters was remarkably consistent across the Roman Empire. From Pompeii to Verona, from El Jem in Tunisia to Arles in France, you'd find the same basic oval shape, tiered seating, and central arena. This standardization allowed for efficient construction and ensured that the spectacle could be replicated wherever Roman influence spread. The seating arrangements reflected the rigid social hierarchy of Rome. The emperor and his retinue had the best seats, closest to the action, often in a special box. Senators and equestrians occupied the lower tiers, followed by ordinary citizens, and finally, women and the poorest citizens in the highest, most distant seats. You, as a spectator, would know your place, literally, within this grand social order. It was a visual representation of Roman society, with the arena floor acting as a stage for both combat and social display.
Beyond the Colosseum, hundreds of amphitheaters dotted the Roman landscape. Some were smaller, serving local communities, while others, like the amphitheater of Capua, were significant training grounds for gladiators, even larger than the Colosseum in their early forms. It was at Capua, in fact, that Spartacus and his fellow gladiators launched their famous revolt. These structures were not just venues for games, they were central to Roman urban life, places where communities gathered, news was exchanged, and Roman identity was reinforced. They were the ancient world's community centers, sports stadiums, and propaganda machines all rolled into one. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these massive amphitheaters was purely for entertainment or if they also served as a powerful tool for social control and the reinforcement of imperial power. Was it simply about giving the people what they wanted? Or was it a deliberate strategy to distract the populace from political grievances and reinforce the emperor's authority? It's a complex question, one that delves into the psychology of mass spectacle and the intricate relationship between rulers and the ruled. The construction of these amphitheaters was often funded by emperors or wealthy benefactors, serving as a public display of their generosity and power. The materials used varied depending on the region, from local stone to imported marble, but the underlying architectural principles remained the same. The sheer amount of labor involved, often by slaves and prisoners, was immense, a stark reminder of the human cost behind these grand structures. As you gaze upon the ruins of these ancient arenas today, you can almost hear the echoes of the past, the roar of the crowd, the clash of steel, the desperate cries, and the silent, enduring testament to a civilization obsessed with spectacle. And for you, the gladiator, it was the stage upon which your fate, and perhaps your fleeting glory, would be decided.
You've trained, you've been armed, and you've seen the magnificent, terrifying stage that awaits you. But before the first drop of blood stains the sand, before the roar of the crowd reaches its fever pitch, there was a ritual, a grand procession designed to build anticipation, to showcase the might of Rome, and to present you, the gladiator, as both a spectacle and a sacrifice. This was the Pampa, the pre-fight parade, and it was as much a part of the show as the combat itself. Imagine the tension, the nervous energy as you prepare to step into the blinding sunlight. A mainstream historical fact is that the Pampa was an elaborate and highly choreographed spectacle designed to impress and excite the Roman populace. It typically began outside the amphitheater, with a procession that wound its way through the streets of Rome or whatever city was hosting the games. At the head of the parade would be the editor, the organizer of the games, often a high-ranking magistrate or the emperor himself, resplendent in ceremonial robes, surrounded by lictors and attendants. Then came musicians playing trumpets, horns, and flutes, their sounds echoing through the streets, announcing the impending spectacle. You'd hear the rhythmic beat of drums, a primal pulse that quickened the heart and stirred the soul of the crowd. Following the musicians were chariots carrying images of the gods and goddesses, emphasizing the religious aspect of the games, a nod to their ancient origins. Then came the gladiators themselves, marching in their full, gleaming armor, their weapons polished to a blinding sheen. You, as a gladiator, would be part of this procession, your face perhaps stoic, perhaps a mask of defiance, knowing that thousands of eyes were upon you, judging your every step. The crowd would line the streets, cheering, shouting, placing bets, eager to catch a glimpse of the men who would soon be fighting for their lives. It was a moment of intense public scrutiny, a chance for the gladiators to make an impression before they even entered the arena. It's like the opening ceremony of the Olympics, but with a much more direct and immediate threat of death for the participants. Behind the gladiators came the venatores and bestiaries, the animal fighters, often accompanied by the exotic beasts they would soon face: lions, tigers, bears, even elephants, all caged and snarling, adding to the sense of danger and spectacle. Then came the condemned criminals, those destined for execution, often stripped naked and bound, a grim reminder of the consequences of defying Roman law. The procession would culminate at the amphitheater, where the editor would take his place in the imperial box, and the gladiators would make their final, dramatic entrance into the arena. Now for a quirky tidbit. During the Pampa, gladiators would often salute the editor with the famous phrase, Ave, Imperator, moritori te salutant. Hail, Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. While this phrase is iconic and widely associated with gladiators, historians still debate how frequently it was actually used. Some scholars believe it was a rare occurrence, perhaps used only for major events or by condemned criminals, rather than a standard greeting for every gladiator before every fight. It's like the opening ceremony of the Olympics, but with a much more direct and immediate threat of death for the participants.
Once inside the arena, the gladiators would perform a warm-up, a sort of mock combat with wooden weapons to demonstrate their skill and agility to the crowd. This was their last chance to impress, to show off their prowess and to get the crowd on their side. You'd hear the rhythmic clang of wooden swords, the shouts of the doctores, and the rising murmur of the crowd as they assessed the fighters. This was followed by a final inspection by the editor or his representatives, ensuring that all weapons were sharp and all armor was in order. There was no cheating in the arena, at least not in terms of equipment. The atmosphere during the pompa was electric. The air would be thick with the scent of incense, used to purify the arena, and the excited chatter of the crowd. Vendors would hawk their wares, food, drink, souvenirs, and even programs listing the day's matchups. You, as a spectator, would be caught up in the collective excitement, the shared anticipation of the violence to come. It was a communal experience, a moment where all social classes, from the emperor to the common citizen, were united in their shared passion for the games. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the pompa was to elevate the gladiators to heroic status or to emphasize their role as sacrificial victims. Was it a celebration of martial prowess or a grim procession to the slaughter? It's a debate that touches on the complex psychology of the Roman public and their relationship with violence. The parade certainly highlighted the gladiators' physical perfection and their readiness for combat, but it also underscored their ultimate fate. The pompa also served a practical purpose. It allowed the audience to familiarize themselves with the gladiators, to pick their favorites, and to understand the matchups. Each gladiator type, with its distinctive armor and weapons, would be clearly visible, allowing the spectators to anticipate the fighting styles and strategies. It was a living program, a visual guide to the day's events. And for the gladiators, it was their last walk in the light, a final moment of recognition before the grim business of combat began. As the procession concluded and the gladiators took their positions, a hush would fall over the vast amphitheater, a moment of pregnant silence before the storm. The sun would beat down on the sand, reflecting off the polished bronze of the helmets, and the air would crackle with anticipation. You, the gladiator, would take a deep breath, the scent of dust and fear filling your lungs, and prepare for the ultimate test. The rituals were over. The show was about to begin. The trumpets blare, a deafening fanfare that reverberates through your very bones. The hush that followed the pompa shatters, replaced by a roar, a primal wave of sound from tens of thousands of throats. You're in the arena now, the sun a blinding spotlight, the sand warm beneath your feet. This is it. This is what all the training, all the pain, all the anticipation has led to. This is combat, raw and brutal, a life-and-death struggle played out for the entertainment of an insatiable crowd. You take a deep breath, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of fear, and you face your opponent. A mainstream historical fact is that gladiator combat, while brutal, was governed by strict rules and overseen by a referee, the summa rudis, and his assistants. This wasn't a chaotic brawl, it was a highly ritualized duel. The referee would ensure fair play, stopping the fight if a gladiator dropped his weapon or if one was clearly incapacitated but not yet dead. He could also intervene to separate combatants if the fight became too static or if one gladiator was clearly outmatched and suffering excessively. Imagine the pressure on this poor soul, trying to maintain order in a blood-soaked arena with a roaring crowd demanding action. He'd carry a staff, the rudis, which he could use to separate fighters or even strike them if they disobeyed his commands. It was a delicate balance between allowing the spectacle to unfold and preventing it from devolving into pure anarchy. The fight would begin with an exchange of blows, each gladiator employing the techniques drilled into him in the ludus. You'd feint, parry, thrust, and slash, constantly moving, constantly looking for an opening. The weight of your armor, the heat of the sun, the exertion of combat, it all conspired to drain your energy. You'd hear the clang of steel on steel, the rasp of your own breath, and the shouts of the crowd, a confusing cacophony that somehow sharpened your focus. Every movement was calculated. Every strike had a purpose. It was a dance of death, where a single misstep could mean the end,
Now for a quirky tidbit, gladiators were often paired based on contrasting fighting styles, which was believed to make the fights more exciting and unpredictable. For example, a heavily armored murmillo might face a nimble thrax, or a net-wielding retiarius would be pitted against a helmeted secutor. This wasn't just random, it was a deliberate choice to create dynamic matchups. The idea was to prevent stalemates and ensure a constant flow of action. Imagine a modern boxing match where one fighter is a heavy slugger and the other is a fast, elusive counterpuncher. The Romans understood that variety was the spice of life, even when that life was being fought for in the arena. It's a bit like a carefully crafted theatrical performance, where the characters are designed to complement and challenge each other, but with actual swords and no safety nets.
As the fight progressed, the crowd's involvement would intensify. They'd cheer for skillful maneuvers, groan at missed opportunities, and shout advice or insults to the combatants. You'd be acutely aware of their presence, their collective will, a palpable force. If you fought bravely, even in defeat, you might earn their respect. If you showed cowardice, their disdain would be swift and merciless. The crowd held immense power, particularly when it came to the fate of a defeated gladiator. When one gladiator was clearly defeated, perhaps disarmed, wounded, or simply too exhausted to continue, he would signal his submission, usually by raising a finger. At this point, the fight would pause, and the editor, the organizer of the games, would consult the crowd. This was the moment of truth, the famous thumbs up or thumbs down decision. While the exact gesture is debated, some historians believe a thumb pointed down meant life, symbolizing a sheathed sword, and a thumb pointed up or towards the throat meant death. The crowd's will was paramount. If they wanted you to live, you lived. If they wanted you to die, your opponent would deliver the coup de grace. Historians still argue whether the crowd's decision was truly democratic, reflecting the will of the masses, or if it was often swayed by the editor or even by the gladiators themselves, who might appeal to the crowd for mercy or demand a swift end. Was it a genuine expression of popular sentiment, or a carefully managed illusion of power? It's a question that delves into the complex dynamics of crowd psychology and the manipulation of public opinion in ancient Rome. If you were granted mercy, you would be taken from the arena to receive medical attention. If you were condemned to die, your opponent would execute you, often with a quick, merciful thrust to the throat or heart. The body would then be dragged out of the arena through the Porta Libitiniaria, the Gate of Death, named after the goddess of funerals. This grim exit served as a stark reminder of the ultimate consequence of defeat. But not all fights ended in death. Many gladiators survived multiple bouts, becoming seasoned veterans. Their experience made them more valuable, and their survival was a testament to their skill, courage, and perhaps a bit of luck. These survivors would return to the ludus, their wounds tended, ready to train for their next appearance. Each victory brought them closer to the ultimate prize, freedom. The combat itself was a test of physical prowess, mental fortitude, and tactical thinking. You had to anticipate your opponent's moves, exploit their weaknesses, and protect your own vulnerabilities. The roar of the crowd, the smell of blood, the blinding sun, it all combined to create an overwhelming sensory experience. Yet amidst the chaos, you had to maintain your composure, to execute your training, and to fight for your life. Sometimes fights would be drawn, ending in a stans missus, where both gladiators fought so bravely and skillfully that the editor would declare it a tie, and both would be allowed to leave the arena alive. This was a rare but celebrated outcome, a testament to the exceptional courage and skill of both combatants. It was a moment where the spectacle transcended mere violence and became a celebration of human endurance and martial artistry. So as you stand there, perhaps imagining the sand beneath your feet, the weight of your weapon, and the roar of the crowd, remember that gladiator combat was more than just a fight.
It was a complex ritual, a brutal performance, and a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the power of spectacle in ancient Rome. And for you, the gladiator, every swing of the sword, every parry, every desperate breath was a testament to your will to survive.
You felt the sand beneath your feet, heard the clang of steel, and perhaps even tasted the metallic tang of your own fear. But as you stand in the arena fighting for your life, there's another force at play, one that can be even more powerful than your opponent's blade, the crowd. Imagine tens of thousands of voices, a single undulating entity, their collective will swaying your fate. The roar of the masses wasn't just background noise, it was an active participant in the drama, a living, breathing barometer of your performance. A mainstream historical fact is that the Roman crowd held immense power over the fate of a defeated gladiator. When a gladiator was clearly beaten and signaled his submission, the decision of life or death rested not with the editor alone, but with the collective will of the spectators. This was the famous pollice verso, the turning of the thumb, a gesture that has been debated for centuries, but undeniably signified the crowd's verdict. If they wanted you to live, they would signal mercy. If they wanted you to die, your opponent would deliver the final blow. You, the gladiator, would be acutely aware of this power, fighting not just for your life, but for the approval of the thousands of eyes fixed upon you. Their cheers could fuel your courage. Their boos could shatter your resolve. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly unpredictable force. The crowd was a diverse entity, a microcosm of Roman society, from the emperor and his retinue in their privileged box, to the senators and equestrians in the lower tiers, to the common citizens, women, and even slaves crammed into the upper reaches of the amphitheater. Everyone had a stake in the games. They came for entertainment, for excitement, for a break from the mundane realities of daily life. They came to see heroes and villains, to witness courage and cowardice, and to participate in a communal experience that transcended social boundaries. You could be a baker, a senator, or a slave, but in the arena, you were all Romans, united by the spectacle unfolding before you. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Roman crowd was not always a passive observer. They were known to be incredibly vocal, shouting encouragement, advice, and even insults to the gladiators. They would often chant the names of their favorite fighters, creating a deafening chorus that echoed through the amphitheater. Imagine trying to concentrate on your opponent's movements while thousands of people are screaming, "Stab him in the neck!" or "Run, you coward!" It must have been an overwhelming sensory experience, a constant barrage of sound that could either spur you on or completely unnerve you. Some gladiators, particularly the popular ones, would even play to the crowd, acknowledging their cheers or making dramatic gestures to elicit a stronger reaction. It was a symbiotic relationship, a performance where the audience was as much a part of the show as the performers themselves. It's a bit like a modern-day sports crowd, but with much higher stakes and a direct say in the outcome. The crowd's preferences were often influenced by various factors. They might favor a gladiator from their own city or region, or one who had a particularly impressive winning streak. They might be swayed by a gladiator's bravery, even in defeat, or by a dramatic comeback. The editor of the games, who ultimately made the final decision on life or death, would often defer to the crowd's wishes, as their approval was crucial for his own political standing. It was a delicate dance between the power of the elite and the will of the masses, played out in the dusty arena.
Historians still argue whether the Roman crowd's bloodlust was an inherent characteristic of the Roman people,
or if it was a product of the social and political environment that fostered such spectacles. Was it a reflection of a brutal society or a controlled outlet for societal tensions? It's a debate that delves into the complex psychology of mass entertainment and the role of violence in ancient cultures. The games certainly provided an opportunity for the lower classes to feel a sense of power and agency, even if it was only over the life of a condemned man or a slave. The atmosphere in the amphitheater was electric. Vendors would weave through the stands, selling food, drinks, and souvenirs. Spectators would place bets on their favorite gladiators, adding another layer of excitement to the proceedings. The air would be thick with the smell of sweat, dust, and sometimes blood. The sun would beat down, reflecting off the polished armor, and the roar of the crowd would be a constant, pulsating presence. It was a sensory overload, an immersive experience that captivated the Roman populace for centuries. For you, the gladiator, the crowd was both a source of terror and a potential savior. Their approval could mean life, their disapproval, death. You learned to read their moods, to understand their desires, and to play to their expectations. A dramatic flourish, a brave stand, a defiant gesture, these could all sway the tide of public opinion in your favor. Your life literally depended on your ability to entertain, to thrill, and to connect with the thousands of strangers who watched your every move. It was a performance where the stakes were higher than any actor could ever imagine. And when the fight was over, whether in victory or defeat, the crowd's reaction would be immediate and visceral. Cheers, applause, boos, or even silence, each response carried immense weight. If you won, you would bask in their adulation, a fleeting moment of glory that made all the pain and sacrifice worthwhile. If you lost and were granted mercy, you would carry the shame of defeat, but also the relief of survival. And if you lost and were condemned, the crowd's silence or their final chilling roar would be the last sound you ever heard. The crowd, in its collective power, was the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner in the Roman arena. You felt the crowd's power, their collective breath, a wave that could lift you to glory or drown you in despair. But above the roar of the masses, perched in the most opulent box, sat the ultimate arbiter of your fate, the one whose nod or gesture could seal your destiny, the emperor. These rulers of Rome understood the profound power of the games, not just as entertainment, but as a vital tool for maintaining their authority, projecting their image, and keeping the vast populace under their sway. You might have been fighting for your life, but in a very real sense, you were also fighting for the emperor's approval, a pawn in a much larger political game. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman emperors, from Augustus to the very last days of the Western Empire, heavily patronized and manipulated the gladiator games. They understood the principle of bread and circuses, panem et circenses, a phrase coined by the satirist Juvenal. By providing free grain and spectacular entertainment, emperors could distract the populace from political grievances, economic hardships, and the often brutal realities of imperial rule. Imagine yourself as a common Roman citizen, perhaps struggling to make ends meet, but then the emperor announces a lavish series of games, free for all. For a few days, your worries would melt away, replaced by the thrill of the arena, the shared excitement, and the feeling of being part of something grand. It was a brilliant strategy, a way to buy loyalty and maintain social order without resorting to constant military force. The games were a direct line between the emperor and his people, a visible demonstration of his generosity and power. You, the gladiator, were a crucial part of this imperial propaganda machine, your blood and sweat serving to reinforce the emperor's benevolent image.
Emperors often personally presided over the games, making decisions on life and death, and sometimes even participating in the spectacle themselves. Think of Commodus, the emperor famously depicted in the movie Gladiator, who fancied himself a gladiator and fought in the arena, albeit against opponents who were often handicapped or disarmed. While Commodus's antics were extreme, many emperors used the games to display their own physical prowess, their courage, or their connection to the martial traditions of Rome. It was a way to project an image of strength and leadership, to show the people that their ruler was not just a distant figure, but a man of action, capable of commanding respect and inspiring awe. You, as a gladiator, might find yourself fighting under the direct gaze of the emperor, every move scrutinized, every blow weighed. The pressure would be immense, knowing that the most powerful man in the world was watching your every move. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some emperors, in their zeal to impress the crowds, would stage truly bizarre and extravagant spectacles. Emperor Caligula, known for his eccentricities, once ordered a gladiator contest where the fighters were all left-handed, just for the novelty of it. Imagine the confusion, the awkwardness, as these gladiators, accustomed to fighting right-handed opponents, suddenly found themselves facing a mirror image of their own fighting style. It's like trying to play tennis with your non-dominant hand, but with swords and a very angry crowd. These unusual matchups were designed to keep the audience entertained, to prevent boredom, and to showcase the emperor's absolute authority, to demonstrate that they could command anything, even the very nature of combat itself.
Beyond mere entertainment, the games served as a powerful symbol of Roman military might and conquest. The exotic beasts brought from the far corners of the empire, the gladiators representing conquered peoples, the reenactments of famous battles, all served to remind the Roman populace of their empire's vast reach and military dominance. When you saw a lion from Africa or a bear from Germania being paraded through the arena, it was a tangible representation of Rome's global power. You, the gladiator, whether a captured Gaul or a Thracian, became a living trophy, a testament to Rome's ability to subdue its enemies and turn them into instruments of its own entertainment. It was a constant, visceral reminder of who was in charge. Emperors also used the games to foster a sense of unity and shared identity among the diverse populations of the empire. By bringing people together in a common space, sharing a common experience, the games helped to forge a collective Roman identity. The roar of the crowd, the shared emotions of excitement, fear, and triumph created a bond that transcended social class and ethnic origin. It was a way to integrate new citizens and conquered peoples into the Roman way of life, to make them feel part of the grand Roman project. You, the gladiator, were a catalyst for this unity, your struggles and triumphs becoming a shared narrative for the entire empire. Historians still argue whether the emperor's patronage of the games was a genuine expression of their love for the spectacle, or if it was primarily a cynical political maneuver to maintain control over the masses. Was it a true passion for martial arts and entertainment, or a calculated strategy of social engineering? It's a debate that delves into the complex motivations of power and the intricate relationship between rulers and the ruled in ancient Rome. The truth, as often is the case, probably lies somewhere in between, a blend of genuine enjoyment and shrewd political calculation. The scale of imperial games could be truly staggering. Emperor Trajan, after his Dacian Wars, held games that lasted for 123 days, involving 11,000 animals and 10,000 gladiators. Imagine the logistical nightmare of organizing such an event, the sheer amount of resources required, the number of lives consumed. These were not just games, they were massive, state-sponsored productions designed to awe and overwhelm the senses. They were a display of imperial wealth, power, and organizational capacity on a scale that is almost unimaginable today.
You, the gladiator, would be just one face in a sea of thousands, a tiny cog in a massive, deadly machine.
Even the seating arrangements in the amphitheater reflected the imperial hierarchy. The emperor's box was always the most prominent, offering the best view and symbolizing his supreme authority. Surrounding him would be his family, his advisors, and the most important dignitaries, a visual representation of the imperial court. The games were not just about the gladiators, they were about the emperor, his power, and his relationship with his people. They were a constant reaffirmation of the social order, with the emperor at its apex. So as you stand in the arena facing your opponent, remember that your fight is not just your own. It is a performance for the emperor, a testament to his power, and a distraction for his people. Your life, your death, your glory, or your defeat, it all served a larger purpose in the grand imperial scheme of things. And for the emperor, you were a valuable asset, a living symbol of his control over life and death, a crucial element in the intricate dance of power that defined ancient Rome. You've seen the male gladiators, their brawn and skill dominating the arena. But what if I told you that the roar of the crowd wasn't always reserved for men? What if, amidst the dust and the blood, there were women, fighting with the same ferocity, the same courage, and often the same tragic end? It's a lesser-known chapter in gladiator history, one that challenges our preconceived notions of Roman society and the roles women played within it. You might be surprised to learn that the arena, in its own brutal way, offered a peculiar kind of liberation, however fleeting, to some women. A mainstream historical fact is that while rare, there is compelling archaeological and literary evidence of female gladiators, known as gladiatresses. These women defied the traditional Roman expectations of female modesty and domesticity, stepping into a world dominated by men and violence. Imagine the shock, the fascination, the sheer audacity of it. You, as a Roman spectator, might have initially scoffed, but as you watch these women fight, perhaps with the same skill and determination as their male counterparts, your skepticism might have turned to awe or even grudging respect. They were not typically slaves or condemned criminals like most male gladiators. Instead, they were often women from the lower classes, or even in some rare instances, women from higher social strata seeking fame, fortune, or simply an escape from the confines of conventional life. Their existence challenges the simplistic view of Roman women as solely confined to the domestic sphere, revealing a more complex and sometimes rebellious reality. One of the most famous pieces of evidence for gladiatresses is a marble relief from Halicarnassus, modern-day Bodrum, Turkey, dating to the 1st or 2nd century CE. It depicts two female gladiators named Amazon and Achillea, fighting in what appears to be a stans missus, a draw where both were honorably discharged. They are shown in typical gladiator attire, with bare breasts, helmets, and shields, and are clearly identified by their names. This relief is a powerful visual testament to their existence and their participation in the games. It's like finding a photograph of a female boxer from the 1800s, a clear, undeniable piece of evidence that shatters assumptions.
Now for a quirky tidbit. Gladiatrixes were often presented as exotic novelties, sometimes fighting in pairs or against dwarfs, adding an extra layer of spectacle to the games. Emperor Domitian, for instance, was known to stage nocturnal gladiator contests featuring women, sometimes by torchlight, creating an even more dramatic and unusual atmosphere. Imagine the scene, the flickering shadows, the hushed whispers, and then the sudden clash of steel as two women engage in deadly combat. It was designed to be sensational, to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable entertainment. It's a bit like a modern-day reality show, constantly trying to outdo itself with more outrageous stunts, but with actual swords and no stunt doubles. The very rarity of their appearances made them all the more captivating, a unique attraction that drew immense crowds. The motivations for women to become gladiators were varied. For some, it might have been economic necessity, a desperate attempt to escape poverty. For others, it could have been a desire for fame and recognition, a chance to break free from the anonymity of everyday life. And for a few, perhaps, it was a genuine passion for combat, a desire to test their limits and prove their strength in the ultimate arena. You, as a gladiatrix, would have faced not only the physical dangers of the arena, but also the social stigma of defying gender norms. Yet, the allure of the crowd's roar, the possibility of glory, and the chance to earn your own freedom might have been too strong to resist. Their training would have been similar to that of male gladiators, albeit perhaps with adaptations for their physique. They would have learned the same fighting styles, mastered the same weapons, and endured the same rigorous discipline in the ludus. The laniste would have seen them as valuable assets, capable of drawing large crowds and generating significant revenue. They were a commodity just like their male counterparts, but a particularly rare and intriguing one. Historians still argue whether the presence of gladiatrixes indicates a greater degree of gender fluidity and social mobility in Roman society than traditionally assumed, or if their participation was merely a sensationalized exception that ultimately reinforced patriarchal norms. Was it a genuine crack in the glass ceiling, or just a fleeting sideshow designed to titillate? It's a debate that forces us to re-examine the complexities of ancient gender roles and the ways in which power and entertainment intersected.
The Roman authorities, however, eventually grew uncomfortable with the idea of women fighting in the arena. Emperor Septimius Severus, in 200 CE, issued an edict prohibiting women from participating in gladiator games. This ban was likely driven by a desire to uphold traditional Roman values of female modesty and to prevent what was seen as a degradation of public morals. The sight of women, particularly those of higher status, engaging in such a public and violent spectacle, was deemed inappropriate and disruptive to the social order. It's a classic case of society trying to put the genie back in the bottle once the spectacle had become too popular or too challenging to established norms. Despite the ban, the legend of the gladiatrix endured, a testament to their impact on the Roman imagination. Their story reminds us that history is rarely as simple as we imagine, and that even in the most rigid societies, there are always individuals who defy expectations and carve out their own paths, however dangerous or unconventional. They were a powerful symbol of female strength and defiance, a fleeting glimpse of women stepping outside the boundaries prescribed for them. So, as you consider the gladiatrix, remember that the arena was not just a stage for male prowess. It was, for a brief and brutal period, a place where women, too, could test their courage, earn their fame, and in doing so, challenge the very fabric of Roman society. Their story is a whisper from the past, a reminder that even in the most unlikely of places, the spirit of rebellion and the desire for recognition can find a way to shine. And for you, the spectator, it would have been a sight that would have been both shocking and undeniably captivating.
You've witnessed the human drama of gladiator combat, the clash of steel and the roar of the crowd. But the Roman spectacle wasn't limited to man-on-man duels. Oh no. Before, after, or even alongside the gladiatorial contests, the arena would transform into a wild, untamed landscape filled with exotic beasts and daring hunters. This was the world of the venationes, the beast hunts, and they were as much a part of the Roman games as the gladiators themselves. Imagine the smell of fear, not just from the condemned, but from the caged animals, a primal scent that mingled with the dust and the blood. You're about to enter a very different kind of arena, one where the rules of engagement were even more brutal. A mainstream historical fact is that venationes were elaborate spectacles involving the hunting and killing of wild animals, often exotic species brought from the far reaches of the Roman Empire. These hunts were incredibly popular, showcasing Rome's power and control over nature, and providing a thrilling display of courage and skill from the venatores, hunters, and bestiari, beast fighters. Imagine a parade of lions from Africa, bears from Germania, panthers from Asia, even crocodiles and hippos from the Nile, all paraded through the streets before being unleashed into the arena. You'd see elephants, rhinos, and ostriches, creatures that most Romans had never seen before, brought to Rome solely for the purpose of being hunted and killed for entertainment. It was a tangible demonstration of the empire's vast reach, a living map of its conquests. The sheer logistics of capturing, transporting, and maintaining these animals, often across thousands of miles, was a monumental undertaking, a testament to Roman organizational prowess and their seemingly limitless resources. It's like a very violent, very expensive, and very real-life version of a safari, but with the animals always losing. The venationes were not just about hunting, they were also about showcasing the bravery and skill of the venatores, who were often professional hunters, trained in the use of spears, bows, and nets. They would face these dangerous animals in a variety of scenarios, sometimes on foot, sometimes from horseback, and sometimes even from specially constructed platforms or chariots. You'd watch as a venator deftly dodged a charging bull or skillfully brought down a lion with a well-aimed spear. It was a display of human courage against the raw power of the wild, a primal struggle that captivated the Roman audience. The arena floor would often be decorated to resemble natural habitats, with trees, rocks, and even artificial hills, creating a more immersive experience for the spectators. It was a theatrical performance, but one where the danger was very real. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some venationes were designed to be incredibly elaborate, almost like a theatrical play with animals. Emperor Nero, for example, once staged a venatione where he himself, dressed as Hercules, fought a lion in the arena. While this was likely a carefully controlled spectacle designed to flatter the emperor, it highlights the theatricality and the desire for novelty that permeated the games. Imagine the sheer absurdity of it. The emperor, the most powerful man in the world, pretending to be a mythical hero, battling a beast that was probably half-drugged. It's like a modern-day celebrity wrestling match, but with actual wild animals and a much higher chance of accidental dismemberment. These elaborate productions were designed to leave a lasting impression on the audience, to create a sense of wonder and awe, and to further elevate the status of the emperor as a divine figure, capable of controlling even the wildest forces of nature.
Beyond the staged hunts, animals were also used in other ways during the games. Sometimes they were simply released into the arena and killed by archers or other armed men, a form of mass slaughter designed to entertain the crowd with sheer volume of death. Other times, animals were pitted against each other in brutal fights, such as lions against bears or bulls against elephants. These animal-on-animal contests were particularly popular as they offered a raw, untamed display of nature's ferocity. You'd hear the roars, the snarls, the trumpeting, a symphony of primal violence that thrilled the Roman audience. It was a grim reminder of the brutal hierarchy of the natural world and of Rome's place at its apex. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the venatones was purely for entertainment or if they also served a symbolic function, demonstrating Rome's dominion over the natural world and its ability to bring order to chaos. Was it simply a blood sport or a deeper commentary on imperial power and control?
It's a debate that delves into the complex relationship between humans and animals in the ancient world, and the ways in which power was expressed through spectacle. The sheer number of animals killed in these games was staggering, leading to the extinction or near extinction of several species in North Africa and parts of Europe. The popularity of venetones grew significantly during the imperial period, reaching their peak under emperors like Trajan, who, as we mentioned, staged games involving thousands of animals. The demand for exotic beasts fueled the vast network of animal capture and trade stretching across the empire. You'd have specialized hunters and traders risking their lives to bring these creatures to Rome, knowing that a successful capture could bring immense wealth. It was a dangerous and lucrative business driven by the insatiable appetite of the Roman public for novelty and spectacle. Sometimes, the venetones would be combined with other forms of entertainment, such as public executions. Condemned criminals, as we'll discuss further, might be thrown to the beasts, a gruesome form of capital punishment that served as both a deterrent and a spectacle. This blurring of lines between entertainment and execution highlights the brutal realities of Roman justice and the casual cruelty that often accompanied the games. You, as a spectator, would witness not just the death of animals, but the agonizing demise of human beings, a stark reminder of the power of the state. The roar of the animals, the shouts of the venatores, the screams of the condemned, it all contributed to the overwhelming sensory experience of the venetones. The arena, usually covered in sand, would often be stained with blood, a grim testament to the violence that unfolded within its walls. The smell of wild beasts, of fear and of death would linger in the air, a potent reminder of the raw, untamed power that Rome had brought under its control. It was a spectacle that appealed to the most primal instincts, a celebration of conquest, both over man and over nature. So, as you imagine the arena transformed into a wild jungle filled with snarling beasts and daring hunters, remember that the venetones were more than just a sideshow. They were an integral part of the Roman games, a powerful demonstration of imperial might and a chilling testament to the Roman appetite for spectacle, no matter the cost. And for you, as a spectator, it was a thrilling, terrifying, and utterly unforgettable experience, a glimpse into the wild heart of the Roman Empire.
You've seen the gladiators fight. You've witnessed the spectacle of the beast hunts. But there was another, far grimmer aspect to the Roman games, one that served as a stark and brutal reminder of the consequences of defying Roman law. This was the damnatio ad bestias, the condemnation to the beasts, a form of public execution that blurred the lines between justice, terror, and entertainment. Imagine the chilling silence that would fall over the crowd, a different kind of anticipation, as the condemned were led into the arena, stripped of dignity, facing a fate more terrifying than any gladiator's duel. You're about to witness the ultimate display of Roman power, a spectacle designed not just to entertain, but to instill fear and reinforce the absolute authority of the state. A mainstream historical fact is that damnatio ad bestias was a common form of capital punishment in the Roman Empire, particularly for serious crimes like treason, murder, arson, and later, for Christians. These executions were not random acts of violence. They were carefully orchestrated public spectacles designed to serve as a deterrent and to demonstrate the state's absolute power over life and death. Imagine yourself as a Roman citizen watching from the stands. You'd see these condemned individuals, often naked or barely clothed, sometimes tied to stakes or carts, brought into the arena. The gates to the animal cages would then open, and hungry, agitated beasts, lions, bears, leopards, even wild bulls would be unleashed upon them. The screams, the roars, the blood. It was a horrifying display, but one that the Roman populace was accustomed to and often demanded. It was a visceral lesson in obedience, a chilling reminder that the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was maintained by an iron fist. You might avert your eyes, or you might watch with morbid fascination, but you would certainly understand the message. Crime does not pay, and Rome's justice is swift and merciless. These executions were often staged to be as dramatic and gruesome as possible. Sometimes the condemned would be dressed in theatrical costumes, mimicking figures from mythology, only to be torn apart by animals in a grim reenactment of ancient myths. For instance, a criminal might be dressed as Orpheus, only to be devoured by a bear, or as Prometheus, chained to a rock and having his liver eaten by an eagle, though perhaps a less dramatic bird in reality. This added a layer of cruel irony and theatricality to the proceedings, turning a simple execution into a morbid play. It was a way to elevate the horror, to make it more memorable, more impactful. You'd see the condemned desperately trying to fight back, or simply cowering in terror. Their futile struggles only served to heighten the drama for the bloodthirsty crowd. Now for a quirky tidbit, some condemned individuals, particularly those who were deemed to have committed particularly heinous crimes, were forced to fight each other to the death before being thrown to the beasts, or even made to fight armed gladiators with little to no training or equipment. This was known as ad gladium or ad ludum, and it was a way to prolong their suffering and extract maximum entertainment value from their demise. Imagine being handed a dull knife and told to fight a trained gladiator, knowing that even if you somehow won, your ultimate fate was still the jaws of a lion. It's a bit like being given a choice between two terrible options, neither of which ends well. The Romans, in their pursuit of spectacle, found endless ways to innovate in cruelty, ensuring that every execution was unique and memorable.
The damnatio ad bestias was particularly used against early Christians. As Christianity spread, its adherents refused to worship the Roman gods or the emperor, which was seen as an act of treason against the state. This made them prime targets for public execution in the arena. The sight of Christians, often singing hymns or praying as they faced the beasts, was both horrifying and, for some, strangely compelling. While the Romans saw it as a just punishment for their defiance, for the Christians themselves it was a martyrdom, a testament to their faith. You, as a Roman, might have seen them as stubborn fanatics, or perhaps, in a quiet moment, wondered about the source of their unwavering conviction. Historians still argue whether the damnatio ad bestias was primarily a form of judicial punishment, a religious sacrifice, or simply a brutal form of mass entertainment. Was it a necessary tool for maintaining social order, or a reflection of a society desensitized to violence? It's a debate that delves into the complex motivations behind public executions and the role of cruelty in ancient societies. The sheer scale of these killings and the casual way in which human life was extinguished for public amusement remains a chilling aspect of Roman history. The logistics of these executions were often intertwined with the venationes. The same animals used for the beast hunts would often be used for the damnatio ad bestias. The arena would be prepared, sometimes with elaborate sets or props, to enhance the theatricality of the execution. The condemned would be paraded before the crowd, their crimes announced, ensuring that everyone understood why they were facing such a gruesome end. It was a carefully managed production designed to maximize its impact on the audience. Sometimes, the condemned would be given a chance to fight back, armed with a small weapon, but this was usually a futile gesture, only serving to prolong their agony. The animals were often starved or provoked to ensure their ferocity. The goal was not a fair fight, but a swift and brutal end, a clear demonstration of the powerlessness of the individual against the might of the state and the savagery of nature. You'd see the desperate struggles, the futile attempts to escape, and then the inevitable, bloody conclusion. The damnatio ad bestias was a powerful psychological tool. It instilled fear in the populace, reminding them of the consequences of rebellion or dissent. It also served to reinforce the social hierarchy, with the powerful elite watching from above as the lowest members of society were brutally dispatched. It was a spectacle that both entertained and terrified, a grim cornerstone of Roman public life. Even the disposal of the bodies was part of the ritual. After the execution, the remains would be dragged out of the arena, often through the same porta libitinaria used for dead gladiators, and unceremoniously disposed of. There was no honor in this death, only the ultimate degradation. It was a final act of dehumanization, ensuring that the condemned were erased from memory, their lives ending in a public display of shame and terror. So, as you reflect on the grim spectacle of the damnatio ad bestias, remember that the Roman arena was not just a place of heroic combat. It was also a stage for the most brutal forms of state-sanctioned violence, a place where justice was dispensed with a terrifying theatricality. And for you, the spectator, it was a chilling reminder of the fragility of life, the absolute power of Rome, and the dark side of human entertainment.
You've seen the gladiators fight, you've witnessed the grim spectacle of executions, and you've understood the power of the crowd and the emperor. But what happens when the instruments of spectacle, the very men and women forced to fight for entertainment, decide they've had enough? What happens when the pawns in this deadly game decide to turn the tables? This brings us to one of the most famous and terrifying episodes in Roman history, the gladiator revolts, chief among them the uprising led by Spartacus. Imagine the fear, the chaos, the sheer audacity of slaves, the lowest rung of Roman society, daring to challenge the might of the Republic. You're about to witness a rebellion that shook Rome to its core. A mainstream historical fact is that the Third Servile War, led by Spartacus, was the most significant slave uprising against the Roman Republic, lasting from 73 to 71 BCE. It began, as many great stories do, in a gladiator school, specifically the ludus of Lentulus Bataeus in Capua, a city renowned for its gladiator training. In 73 BCE, Spartacus, a Thracian gladiator, along with approximately 70 to 78 fellow gladiators, broke out of their school, armed with kitchen utensils and training weapons. Imagine the scene, the sudden, desperate dash for freedom, the clang of makeshift weapons against the guards' armor, the desperate cries of men who had nothing left to lose. They quickly overwhelmed the guards, seized more substantial weapons, and fled to Mount Vesuvius, the very volcano that would one day bury Pompeii. From this initial spark, a wildfire of rebellion spread across southern Italy, attracting thousands of runaway slaves, impoverished farmers, and disaffected citizens. You, as a Roman citizen, would have initially dismissed it as a minor nuisance, a band of unruly slaves. But as their numbers swelled and their victories mounted, that dismissal would turn to alarm, then to outright terror. Spartacus proved to be an extraordinary leader, not just a skilled fighter, but a brilliant tactician and strategist. He organized his disparate forces into a formidable army, capable of defeating several Roman legions sent to suppress them. He understood the strengths and weaknesses of his diverse army, and he exploited the Roman military's arrogance and underestimation of the rebels. His goal, it seems, was not to conquer Rome, but to lead his followers to freedom, perhaps across the Alps and out of Italy, or to Sicily. Imagine the hope, the desperate yearning for liberty that must have fueled these men and women fighting against an empire that had enslaved them. It was a testament to the human spirit's enduring desire for freedom, even in the face of overwhelming odds.
Now for a quirky tidbit. Spartacus reportedly tried to discourage his men from accumulating gold and silver, instead encouraging them to trade their plunder for iron and bronze, essential materials for forging weapons. He understood that their strength lay not in riches, but in their ability to arm themselves and fight. It's a bit like a general telling his troops to trade their fancy watches for more bullets. This pragmatic approach highlights his focus on military necessity over personal gain,
a stark contrast to the avarice often seen among Roman commanders. It also suggests a deeper understanding of the long game, a recognition that true freedom required sustained military capability, not just fleeting wealth. The Roman Senate, initially complacent, grew increasingly alarmed as Spartacus's army continued its rampage, plundering towns and defeating Roman forces. They sent consul after consul, legion after legion, only to see them humiliated by the gladiator-led rebels. The very idea of slaves defeating Roman legions was an affront to their pride and a threat to the entire social order. The fear of a widespread slave revolt, a nightmare scenario for any slave-owning society, gripped Rome. You, as a wealthy Roman landowner, would have been terrified, imagining your own slaves rising up against you, your carefully constructed world crumbling around you. Eventually, the Senate appointed Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's wealthiest and most ambitious men, to lead the campaign against Spartacus. Crassus, known for his ruthlessness, implemented harsh discipline, even decimating his own legions, executing 1 in 10 soldiers to instill fear and obedience. He cornered Spartacus's army in southern Italy, building a massive ditch and wall across the peninsula to trap them. But Spartacus, with a stroke of genius, managed to break through Crassus's lines, albeit at a heavy cost. It was a desperate gamble, a testament to his tactical brilliance and the unwavering resolve of his followers. Historians still argue whether Spartacus was a true revolutionary fighting for the abolition of slavery or simply a pragmatic leader seeking freedom for himself and his followers. Was he a proto-socialist or just a very effective military commander? It's a debate that delves into the motivations of historical figures and the interpretation of their actions through a modern lens. His ultimate goals remain somewhat shrouded in the mists of time, but his impact on Roman society was undeniable.
The final battle was fought in Lucania in 71 BCE. Spartacus, realizing his cause was lost, reportedly tried to reach Crassus in the thick of the fighting, hoping to kill him and end the war. He fought bravely, but was eventually overwhelmed and killed. His body was never recovered, leading to legends and speculation about his ultimate fate. Thousands of his followers were captured, and Crassus, in a brutal display of Roman power, crucified 6,000 of them along the Appian Way, from Capua to Rome, a grim, miles-long testament to the consequences of rebellion. You, traveling that road, would have seen the decaying bodies, a chilling warning to any who dared to challenge Rome. While Spartacus's revolt ultimately failed, it left an indelible mark on Roman history. It exposed the fragility of the Roman social order and the deep-seated fear of slave uprisings. It also highlighted the immense courage and leadership that could emerge from the most unexpected places. The legacy of Spartacus, the gladiator who dared to dream of freedom, has resonated through the centuries, inspiring countless revolutionaries and artists. He became a symbol of resistance against oppression, a reminder that even the most powerful empires can be challenged from within. Other, smaller gladiator revolts occurred throughout Roman history, but none reached the scale or achieved the notoriety of Spartacus's uprising. These rebellions, however brief or localized, served as constant reminders to the Roman elite of the inherent instability of a society built on the backs of enslaved people. They were a persistent thorn in the side of the Republic, a testament to the human cost of their grand spectacles. So, as you reflect on the story of Spartacus, remember that the gladiators were not just passive entertainers. They were men and women capable of immense courage, strategic brilliance, and a burning desire for freedom. Their revolts, particularly the one led by Spartacus, were a powerful, albeit tragic, chapter in the history of the Roman Empire. A reminder that even in the most controlled environments, the human spirit can rebel against its chains. And for you, the Roman, it was a terrifying glimpse into the potential consequences of your society's reliance on forced labor and brutal entertainment.
You've seen the gladiators rise, their glory and their suffering etched into the very fabric of Roman society. You've witnessed their spectacular battles, their grim executions, and even their desperate fight for freedom. But like all empires, and all spectacles, the gladiator games, too, had their twilight. The roar of the crowd, once deafening, began to fade, replaced by murmurs of dissent and changing values. We're now entering the long, slow decline of the gladiator games, a period marked by shifting social attitudes, economic pressures, and the inexorable rise of a new religion. You're about to witness the end of an era, not with a bang, but with a gradual, almost imperceptible whimper. A mainstream historical fact is that the decline of gladiator games was a protracted process spanning several centuries and was primarily driven by the rise of Christianity. In its early days, Christianity was a persecuted religion in the Roman Empire, and many Christians were martyred in the arena, thrown to the beasts or forced to fight. However, as Christianity gained followers and eventually became the official state religion under Emperor Theodosius I in the late 4th century CE, its moral opposition to the games grew stronger. The Christian worldview, with its emphasis on the sanctity of human life and its condemnation of bloodshed for entertainment, was fundamentally at odds with the brutal nature of gladiator combat. Imagine the shift in public discourse from celebrating the courage of the gladiator to condemning the cruelty of the spectacle. You, as a Roman citizen, might find yourself torn between the ingrained tradition of the games and the new moral imperatives of your faith. This wasn't a sudden ban, but a gradual erosion of public support, fueled by religious conviction and the growing influence of Christian leaders who actively campaigned against the games. Emperors, now increasingly Christian themselves, began to issue edicts restricting or outright banning gladiator contests. Emperor Constantine I, the first Christian emperor, issued a decree against gladiator shows in 325 CE, though it wasn't fully enforced. Later emperors like Honorius finally put an end to gladiator fights to the death in 404 CE, following a particularly gruesome incident in the Colosseum where a monk named Telemachus was stoned to death by the crowd for trying to stop a fight. Imagine the scene, a lone monk, driven by faith, stepping into the arena only to be met with the wrath of a crowd still clinging to its ancient traditions. It was a symbolic moment, a clash between the old world and the new, and ultimately the new prevailed. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Even as the games declined, some Roman aristocrats tried to keep the tradition alive, often staging private games on their estates, far from the disapproving eyes of the authorities and the changing public sentiment. It's a bit like a secret fight club for the super rich, clinging to a bygone era of brutal entertainment. These private spectacles, however, lacked the grandeur and scale of the imperial games, becoming mere shadows of their former glory. They were a desperate attempt to preserve a tradition that was slowly but surely being relegated to the annals of history. You might get an invitation to one of these exclusive clandestine events, a glimpse into a fading world, but the magic, the sheer spectacle, would be gone.
Beyond religious objections, other factors contributed to the decline. Economic hardship played a significant role. The vast sums of money required to stage gladiator games for training, feeding, equipping gladiators, and maintaining the amphitheaters became increasingly difficult to justify as the Roman Empire faced mounting financial crises. The empire was struggling with barbarian invasions, internal strife, and a shrinking tax base. Sponsoring lavish games became an unsustainable luxury. You, as a Roman official, would have to weigh the cost of a gladiator show against the pressing need to fund legions or repair infrastructure. The choice, increasingly, became clear. Changing social attitudes also played a part. While the games had been a central part of Roman identity for centuries, tastes evolved. The Roman elite began to find other forms of entertainment, such as chariot racing, which was less morally objectionable and equally thrilling. The intellectual and philosophical currents of the late empire
also fostered a greater sense of humanism, leading some to question the morality of such brutal spectacles. It was a slow cultural shift, a gradual turning away from the casual cruelty that had once defined Roman entertainment. Historians still argue whether the decline of the gladiator games was primarily a top-down imposition by Christian emperors, or if it was a more organic process driven by changing popular tastes and economic realities. Was it a moral victory for Christianity, or simply a reflection of a society that was already moving on? It's a debate that highlights the complex interplay of religious, economic, and social forces in shaping historical change. The truth is likely a combination of all these factors, a perfect storm that gradually extinguished the flame of the gladiator games. The last recorded gladiator fight in Rome itself is believed to have taken place in 404 CE. However, the nations, the beast hunts, continued for a while longer, particularly in the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, where they persisted until the 6th century CE. The fascination with exotic animals and the thrill of the hunt proved more resilient than the moral objections to human combat. You might still see a lion fighting a bear in Constantinople long after the gladiators had vanished from the Colosseum.
The physical structures of the amphitheaters, once bustling with life and death, slowly fell into disrepair. The Colosseum, once the beating heart of Roman entertainment, became a quarry for building materials, its stones repurposed for churches and palaces. The roar of the crowd was replaced by the whisper of the wind, the clash of swords by the chirping of birds. It was a poignant end to a spectacle that had defined an empire for centuries. The legacy of the gladiators, however, would endure. Their stories, their courage, and their tragic fates would be remembered, passed down through generations, even as the games themselves faded into memory. The very word gladiator would continue to evoke images of strength, sacrifice, and the ultimate test of human endurance. You, looking back, can see how deeply ingrained these spectacles were in the Roman psyche, and how difficult it was for them to let go. So, as the sun sets on the gladiator games, remember that their decline was not a simple event, but a complex tapestry woven from religious fervor, economic necessity, and evolving social values. It was the end of an era, a testament to the fact that even the most deeply entrenched traditions can eventually yield to the currents of change. And for you, the observer, it's a reminder that history is always in motion, constantly reshaping itself, even as the echoes of the past continue to resonate. The dust has settled, the roar of the crowd has faded, and the grand amphitheaters stand as silent, crumbling monuments to a bygone era. The gladiator games are long over, consigned to the annals of history. Yet, despite their brutal end, the image of the gladiator, the very idea of these fighters, continues to captivate us, to resonate across millennia. Their legacy isn't just etched in stone, it's woven into the very fabric of our culture, from ancient art to modern blockbusters. You're about to discover why these figures, once condemned to die for entertainment, have achieved a strange, enduring immortality. A mainstream historical fact is that the gladiator, despite being a slave or condemned criminal, became a powerful symbol of courage, discipline, and the ultimate test of human endurance. Their willingness to face death with bravery, their physical prowess, and their adherence to a strict code of conduct, even in the face of overwhelming odds, resonated deeply with Roman values. Imagine yourself as a Roman witnessing a gladiator fight. You'd see not just violence, but a demonstration of virtus, courage, manliness, excellence, a quality highly prized in Roman society. This idealization of the gladiator, even as they were simultaneously despised for their low social status, created a fascinating paradox that continues to intrigue us. They were the ultimate underdogs, fighting for their lives against a system that sought to dehumanize them, yet often achieving a form of heroic status through their very struggle.
Their image, whether on mosaics, lamps, or even children's toys, became ubiquitous, a testament to their pervasive cultural impact. You can still find their likenesses today, a silent echo of their past fame.
The fascination with gladiators never truly died. Even after the game ceased, their stories, often embellished and romanticized, continued to be told. During the Renaissance, with renewed interest in classical antiquity, scholars and artists rediscovered the gladiators, seeing them as symbols of classical heroism and physical perfection. The ruins of the Colosseum, once a quarry, became a site of pilgrimage, a place where one could almost hear the echoes of the past. You might imagine a Renaissance artist sketching the crumbling arches, dreaming of the epic battles that once unfolded within its walls, transforming the brutal reality into a romantic ideal. Now for a quirky tidbit, the modern image of the gladiator has been heavily influenced by Hollywood, particularly by films like Spartacus 1960 and Gladiator 2000. While these films have undoubtedly brought the gladiators to a wider audience and fueled our collective imagination, they often take significant liberties with historical accuracy. For instance, the famous thumbs up or thumbs down gesture, while rooted in historical debate, is often portrayed in a simplified and sometimes incorrect manner. Or the idea that gladiators were always fighting for freedom against a tyrannical empire, when many were professional fighters who might have even enjoyed a certain celebrity status. It's a bit like learning about medieval knights solely from Game of Thrones, entertaining, but not always historically precise. These cinematic interpretations, however, have cemented the gladiators' place in popular culture, transforming them from historical figures into archetypal heroes and symbols of rebellion. The gladiator story continues to be reinterpreted and reimagined in various forms of media, from video games where you can be a gladiator, to historical novels that delve into their lives, to documentaries that try to separate fact from fiction. The fascination persists. They represent a primal struggle, a fight for survival against overwhelming odds, a theme that resonates deeply with the human condition. You might find yourself drawn to their story not just for the violence, but for the raw human drama, the courage in the face of death, and the fleeting moments of glory. Their impact extends beyond entertainment. The study of gladiators has provided invaluable insights into Roman society, its values, its social structures, and its complex relationship with violence. Archaeological discoveries such as gladiator barracks and cemeteries continue to shed new light on their lives, their training, and their diets, often challenging long-held assumptions. You might imagine an archaeologist carefully unearthing a gladiator's tomb, piecing together the fragments of a life lived and lost in the arena, bringing their stories back to life one bone at a time. Historians still argue whether the enduring fascination with gladiators is a reflection of a universal human attraction to violence and spectacle, or if it speaks to a deeper admiration for courage, resilience, and the struggle for freedom against oppression. Is it our darker impulses that draw us to their story, or our nobler ones? It's a debate that forces us to confront our own relationship with violence and heroism, and to question what it is about these ancient fighters that continues to hold such a powerful grip on our imagination.
The very word gladiator has entered our lexicon, used to describe anyone who fights bravely against adversity, whether in sports, business, or life itself. We use it to evoke images of strength, determination, and an unwavering will to win. You might hear a sports commentator describe an athlete as a gladiator on the field, a testament to the enduring power of the image. This linguistic legacy is a subtle but powerful reminder of their lasting cultural impact, a testament to how deeply their story has permeated our collective consciousness. So, as you reflect on the enduring legacy of the gladiators, remember that they are more than just historical figures. They are archetypes, symbols of human struggle, courage, and the paradoxical nature of fame and sacrifice. Their story, though brutal, continues to inspire, to entertain, and to provoke thought,
reminding us of the complex and often contradictory aspects of human nature. And for you, the modern observer, their tale is a whisper from the past, a powerful narrative that continues to resonate long after the last roar of the crowd has faded.
You've journeyed through the dust and blood of the arena, from the grim funeral rites of Etruria to the grand spectacles of imperial Rome, witnessed the rise and fall of the gladiator games, and explored their enduring legacy. Now, as the echoes of the crowd finally fade, and the last gladiator's story is told, it's time to settle into the quiet contemplation of what remains. The gladiators, in their brutal reality and their romanticized myth, offer us a profound whisper from the past, a final thought on the human condition, and the strange ways we seek meaning, entertainment, and even transcendence in the face of mortality.
A mainstream historical fact is that the gladiator games, despite their inherent violence, were deeply intertwined with Roman religious beliefs and civic identity. They were not merely entertainment, they were a form of public ritual, a way for Romans to connect with their ancestors, to honor the gods, and to reinforce their collective values of courage, discipline, and martial prowess. Imagine the complex emotions you as a Roman would have felt: the thrill of the spectacle, the fear for the combatants, the pride in Roman might, and the underlying sense of participating in a sacred act. This fusion of religion, politics, and entertainment made the games an indispensable part of Roman life for centuries, a testament to their deep cultural roots. They were a mirror reflecting the very soul of Rome, its strengths, its weaknesses, and its enduring fascination with power and spectacle. As we close this chapter, consider the individual gladiator, stripped of the grand narrative, the historical facts, and the cinematic embellishments. What was it like to be that person, facing certain death for the amusement of thousands? To train relentlessly, to live under the constant shadow of the arena, to perhaps dream of freedom, or simply of surviving one more day. Their lives were short, often brutal, and yet they left an indelible mark on history. They were forced into a role, but within that role, many found a way to display extraordinary courage, skill, and even a strange dignity. You can almost hear their whispers in the wind that rustles through the ruins of the Colosseum. Stories of fear, triumph, and the desperate will to live.
Now, for a quirky tidbit, some historians suggest that the gladiator games, in their later stages, became so popular and ingrained in Roman life that they even influenced the language and metaphors of the time. Phrases and idioms related to gladiator combat found their way into everyday speech, much like sports metaphors permeate our language today. Imagine someone saying, "He's fighting like a murmillo," to describe a stubborn opponent, or "She's got the rudis in her sights," to mean someone is close to achieving their goal. It's a subtle but powerful indicator of how deeply these spectacles permeated the Roman psyche, shaping not just their entertainment, but their very way of thinking and speaking. It's a bit like how we use terms from football or basketball in everyday conversation, but with a much more literal connection to life and death. The gladiator's story is a powerful reminder of the human capacity for both immense cruelty and extraordinary resilience. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own relationship with violence, entertainment, and the exploitation of others. Yet, it also celebrates the indomitable spirit of those who, against all odds, fought for their lives, their honor, and sometimes their freedom. Their tale is a complex tapestry of light and shadow, a testament to the multifaceted nature of humanity. Historians still argue whether the gladiator games were a unique product of Roman culture, or if they represent a universal human tendency towards spectacle and the dramatization of conflict. Are we, in our modern forms of entertainment, simply reenacting ancient impulses, albeit in less bloody ways?
It's a debate that invites introspection, prompting us to examine the roots of our own fascinations and the ways in which we engage with narratives of struggle and triumph. The gladiators, in their enduring presence in our collective consciousness, continue to challenge us, to provoke thought, and to remind us that the past is never truly dead. It merely whispers to us from the shadows.
Their story is a testament to the power of narrative, how even the most brutal realities can be transformed into enduring myths. The gladiator, once a disposable commodity, has become an immortal symbol, a figure that transcends time and culture. You, the listener, have now walked in their footsteps, felt their struggles, and perhaps understood a little more about the complex world they inhabited. Their legacy is not just in the ruins of the Colosseum, but in the very questions they continue to pose about courage, freedom, and the nature of spectacle. So as we finally dim the lights on this journey, let the images of the arena gently recede. The clash of steel, the roar of the crowd, the desperate cries, let them soften, becoming distant echoes in the quiet chambers of your mind. You've explored a world of ancient might and human vulnerability, a place where life and death danced a brutal ballet. Now let the stories settle, like dust on an ancient mosaic, forming a picture that is both vivid and serene. The gladiators, those figures of strength and sacrifice, have shared their tale, and now their whispers become part of your own quiet reflections. There's no need to hold on to the tension, no need to relive the struggle. Just a gentle fading, a soft release as the past drifts into the realm of dreams.